Hello, and welcome back to PM Nightly. Today, we are going to be checking out the top 10 families that chose to stay in unsettling places. Okay, so let's take a look at this, see what's going on. This is a super ugly looking house that we've got sitting here in this picture. Kind of unsettling. Let's go ahead and take a look.
Houses all the way to bunkers and caves. Here are the top 10 families that chose to stay in unsettling places. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Alcatraz. For the years between 1934 to 1963, the Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary was open, operating, and said to house some of the worst and most ruthless prisoners in all of America. Situated in San Francisco Bay, just 1.25 miles from the mainland, Alcatraz Island became home to those in the prison as well as to the guards and their families who also lived on the island. Those who applied for jobs at the penitentiary would have to move there if they got it. Former resident Chuck Stucker explained that life on Alcatraz was similar to those who grew up on a military base. He further explained that, quote, there was a preschool on the island, a small commissary with milk, butter, bread, a post office. My dad had the first color TV on the island, and it was a real popular thing for the adults. Most evenings you were either at someone's house for dinner or they were at yours. On the other hand, however, not everything can be exactly like it is everywhere else. He went on to say, quote, for the older kids, our school bus was the boat that took us to the mainland. School administrators, they were aware of the fear that we could be held hostage to try and get an inmate off the island, so we had small dog tags. IDs that had our names and association with Alcatraz. You wore it with a small metal chain. Aside from that, Chuck remembers life on the island extremely pleasantly, with a specific mention to the gorgeous views he and his family had from their home. In our number 9 spot
Okay, so he said it was like living on a military base. I wouldn't have thought that to be true. It actually never occurred to me that they had families living on Alcatraz. I knew, of course, that they had guards. I thought the guards traveled back and forth, every day as part of their shift. I didn't realize they were living on the island. Okay, it's very interesting.
today we have the Lutz family. Many of us are familiar with the Amityville horror house, but if you're not, basically it was a home that was built in 1927 by a young couple, John and Catherine Moynihan. They and their families lived there until 1965, when they then sold it to the DeFeos. Unfortunately, the fate this family met in the house was a horrific one, with a member of the family taking the lives of the rest. Less than a year after that terrible night, the house was relisted and on the market, and it was sitting at a low $80,000. The house was beautiful, it was big, and the Lutz family just couldn't turn down an offer like that. Despite the family knowing about the history of the house prior to their moving in, they still chose to. They got the home cleansed as soon as they moved in. They even hired a priest to do it for them, but it just wasn't enough, because after just
honestly, just because somebody dies in a home or even if they get murdered, I mean, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the property. In most cases, I don't know about the Amityville horror home, but in most cases, the house didn't kill them. It was somebody, a family member, an intruder, or whatever. I don't think that that would stop me from buying a house either, just because there had been a murder in the home. But some people don't like that.
28 days they needed to leave after claiming to be terrorized by some sort of paranormal activity that was going on in the house. They said that they could hear banging on the walls, one of the family members was starting to hear voices, and the doors would all slam and shut on their own. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Lykov family. In 1936, a Russian family of 4 was fleeing religious persecution, and to do so, they fled into the Siberian wilderness. They took with them a few possessions and some seeds and retreated into the forest. Here, they would build a series of primitive huts as they traveled through until they reached a spot they found habitable, which was near the Mongolian border. They had no contact with the outside world and managed to be completely self-sufficient. When they originally fled into the wilderness, the family consisted of a husband and wife and their 2 children, and while out here in their new home, the couple had 2 more children, making them a family of 6. They spent their days hunting, trapping, and farming, and each year they saved their seeds in order to...
So I wonder if this is the husband and wife. Look how young he looks and look how old she looks. And that's probably from having babies all by herself out in the wilderness. That will age you. Yes. Goodness.
To replant when the next season came around.
Wow.
One of the possessions they brought with them was a crude spinning wheel, which allowed them to turn hemp into fiber for their clothing. They ate a lot of potato patties that were mixed with hemp seeds and ground rye, and they lived like this for almost 50 years. They grew as much food as the land would allow, and they rationed carefully, but each year they grew closer and closer to starvation. As they grew closer to starving, they held a council meeting where they discussed whether or not they should save their seeds to replant or eat them all. Each year, they ultimately decided to save their seeds, and one winter, this cost the mother her life, which she sacrificed for her children. Until a geology team in 1978 found their home, the two youngest children had never even met a person outside of their family. While most of the family has since passed away, one member, the youngest daughter, as of 2019, still lives in this isolated location where she has built herself quite a decent hut and has a herd of goats and a coop of chickens. In our number 7 spot today, we have the tree house. Okay, this one is probably one of the least spooky on this list.
Yeah,
It's
is
more
that the
just
house?
unique, we'll
Yeah,
call it.
it's gorgeous
A family
looking.
located in Hertfordshire, England, has chosen to make their home in a custom-made treehouse that is located in the middle of the forest. I can't tell whether I love or hate this idea. The
I
home
love it.
consists of two separate lofts
That is
that are
gorgeous.
separated by rope bridges that weave through the trees. There's a main loft that has the things like the kitchen and the bathroom, and to exit the house, there's either a ladder or a zip line that'll take you 70 meters down through thick brush and drop you right on a hiking trail. I'm not gonna lie,
I don't
it
know
looks
like
pretty
that.
nice and it wouldn't be too bad to wake up to the sounds of nature every day, but I'm just wondering what the bugs are like up there, and I'm wondering what happens if something breaks. You know,
And what's the
I'm curious
plumbing
about
situation?
sustainability in the long term.
What's going
It's
on
kind of
there?
like a fairy tale, which I love, but I have some practicality questions.
I do too.
In our number 6 spot today, we have the Heinzen family. If you're one of the many, many people who like to mindlessly scroll through TikTok, you might have come across the page of Madison Heinzen and her Rhode Island home. What's so special about this house? Well, it's the one featured in The Conjuring. Madison's parents bought the home in 2019, and she has since documented her paranormal experiences within the home. She even claims to have seen a ghost, saying, quote, "This happened last year when I was in the kitchen. I was eating dinner by myself and I saw someone run by me. I caught it by the left corner of my eye, and all I saw was a veil and a skirt, and it just vanished into thin air. This had all happened in a span of 3 seconds, and I just sat there in complete disbelief, not knowing what to do afterwards." The reason the parents bought this home, despite its very obvious and apparent paranormal history, is because they are in fact paranormal investigators. So I guess that makes a little bit more sense. In our number 5 spot today, we have the remote island. UK couple Boris and Karen von Engelbrechten decided to leave their regular lives behind and move them and their families to the tiny remote island of Fofo, which takes about 3 days to get to. The couple had previously lived in New Zealand for a while, but they decided to make the move in order to have some space from the rest of the world. I guess this place really isn't unsettling, it's just really remote, but I'm sure it's absolutely breathtaking. Upon their arrival, the couple worked with locals to help build a beachside property using materials from the island. The rainwater that falls on the island is piped in as drinking water, and the couple says they are about 60% self-sufficient as they grow their own fruits and veggies, and then they supplement that with a trip every 3 weeks to the nearest large island to get some canned food. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Ashley family. This is a family that are the only
I don't. That would be gorgeous to visit at any rate. But to have small kids living there with no interaction with other kids their own age and stuff, I don't know how that would work out in the long run. That I would have concerns about that if I was a parent. Um, but if it was just two adults or a couple of couples, that would be really nice. Or if you only stayed out there for like half the year and then you went back home for half the year. But my main concern would just be with the kids growing up and learning how to socialize and how do they go to school? Are they just going to school online? Are they being home taught? There's just concerns there. They're not learning how to move through society and get along with people. But it is beautiful.
the only ones who live anywhere along the 400-kilometer length of the Nowitna River in Alaska. The family has been living here for the last 18 years,
They look
despite the
like it.
location being 160 kilometers from the nearest town. Once a year, the family will travel to do a massive grocery shop for cans of
Wow.
produce and evaporated milk, tomato paste, rice, beans, sugar,
Imagine being the
those
cashier who
sorts
has
of
to ring
things.
that up.
But aside from this food that they buy, the family lives off of the land, hunting black bears, wolves, rabbits, ducks, and beavers, and they make jam out of rose hips and berries. The family keeps track of time in their own way, changing their clocks based on the sun and daylight hours and what season it is. They also use solar power in order to power their home. While the transition into this remote lifestyle was a little worrisome at first, the isolation is now something they embrace. They say, quote, people want to know what 18 years of isolation does to you. It changes you. You have time to have more than two thoughts on any one subject. We spend months talking about just one subject because we have time to. In our number 3 spot today, we have the
Okay.
isolated island. For 30 years, this family has been living alone on an island in the middle of a lake in southern Dong Nay province in Vietnam. This 4-hectare island is home to Nguyen Van Long and his family, and it became their home in the 1980s when he and his wife decided to leave their hometown and move to start a new life. They began to earn a living by sawing down.
I wonder what makes them make this decision that they want to just be all alone on an island. I mean, I understand it as far as a vacation or a few months out of the year, but to just completely leave their old life behind and this is where they're living for the rest of their lives and for decades. I don't know that that would really be something I would want to do, but I do wonder what it is that makes them make that decision, to do that. And I wish they would go a little bit into that, but whatever. I mean, it's the limitations of the show.
Down trees, and they then later switched to growing corn and beans and rice. When they moved here, this place actually wasn't an island at first, but became one when the lake was created.
Oh,
From here, the
okay.
growing of the crops got more difficult. Despite the isolation and the lack of electricity, the family stays here because they explain that
Here
life
we
would
go.
be more difficult if they moved to another place without any money. The family studied the new island soil and realized that growing cashews might be their best source of income, which it now is. In the end, he said that he is now used to living on the island and enjoys it there since it has fresh air and is away from the hustle and bustle. He goes on to explain that their children are grown now, and now that they have their own lives, he and his wife want to stay on the island forever. In our number 2 spot
Fair
today,
enough.
we have the
Fair
bunker.
enough.
This is one of the most insane and truly messed up stories I've ever heard, and I don't know where to begin. Basically, in a remote village in the Netherlands, a few years ago, it was discovered that there was a family of 8 that was living in a bunker for 9 years, awaiting what they said to be the end of time. Basically,
Okay.
this family group consisted of a father, 6 adults who he claimed to be his children.
I didn't realize that there were crazy bunker people outside of the United States. We have quite a number of crazy bunker people in this country. I didn't realize it was all over. Sorry.
And then another adult tenant. The oldest child managed to escape the bunker and he headed to a local bar where he told the owner what he had just experienced and explained that he and his siblings needed help. This is what led to charges for Gerrit Jan van Dorsten, who was the supposed father, as well as for Josef Brunner, who was the tenant. Preliminary investigation revealed that the adult children were made to believe that they were the last humans on Earth. In the end, Garrett committed numerous unbelievable and horrific crimes and was charged with a multitude of them. Just last year, however, he was deemed unfit to stand trial, and it's not exactly clear where things will go from here. It's also apparently divided the children, as the oldest 4 were in support of the arrest, with the youngest 2 being against it. All in all, this is just a horrible situation, and I feel terribly for the ones involved. In our number 1 spot today, we have Esther Sturmer. In 1941, Esther Sturmer was living in a little Ukrainian village with her 6 children. They were one of the few Jewish families who lived in the village until late that year when Nazi forces came. Esther, along with her family and 36 of the other Jewish people from her village, were able to escape, and they then spent nearly a year and a half living underground in pitch black in 2 vast caves.
Oh, my
The
God.
group found these deep underground caves that run for miles, and they lived down there for 500 days in total darkness, but they later said that for them, the caves provided them the freedom they were robbed of during the war. 2 of Esther's
And they
children,
survived.
70 years later, spoke about the entire thing and said, quote, "We had a very smart mother. If I wouldn't have had this type of mother, I wouldn't be alive." They also said, quote, "You went to sleep and you had a pillow and you covered up with good blankets. What else you want? You were in paradise." The families would forage for food at night, they built showers and latrines underground, and they lived like this until April of 1944 when the Russian army liberated the area and the five families were able to come back into the light of day. They
So that really says a lot about that person's mother. You know, that she was able to create an atmosphere in a cave in complete darkness in which they weren't afraid. They felt safe, and she was able to normalize it for them, which something horrific like that, that's pretty much the best that a parent can do for their child as they try to keep them safe. So that's amazing. So kudos to her.
They survived, and the two sons said, "We were just happy to survive.
Sure.
Then life started to turn normal, and that's it. We tried to get ahead. We tried to survive after the war."
Yeah, so interesting. I thought the treehouse one, I wouldn't maybe want to live there. I would definitely like to vacation there. That looks interesting. But I got questions about the plumbing. Is there pipes going down the tree? Do they not have proper plumbing? I got questions about that. Um, the Amityville Horror House, I've heard that other people have moved in and they haven't had any problems at all. I believe that it's occupied. It's not like the house has been destroyed or whatever. So I'm not sure how much of that is real, how much of that was a hoax. I know that the murders and everything were real, but I don't know about the people that only stayed there for 28 days. They may or may not have really been going through something. Um, then that other group that they were into the supernatural, they were ghost hunters or whatever, so they were in the perfect location for them. But yeah, it was interesting. But the island, pretty. I wouldn't mind again something like that as a second home that you would go to for a few months out of the year. I don't think that I'd want to completely remove myself from all society and run off and live on an island and only every 3 weeks or whatever. Um, Making a big purchase and trying to live that way, that doesn't appeal to me. But it would be beautiful to visit and spend some time out of each year as like a second home. So let me know in the comments what you think of that. Would you want to live in one of those homes, and would you move into a house that there was a murder before you had moved in? If there wasn't any stories of ghosts or anything like that, but it was just a house where someone got murdered, would you move into that home? Because I don't think that would stop me from moving into the house if I like the house. And that's just me. But, let me know in the comments. But anyway, thank you for spending time with me, watching my video, and I hope to see you again later on.